Hello crafty friends, it's Alicia of the Call Me Crafty YouTube channel, and in today's video I'm going to be sharing with you how I made these 4 cards using this single stamp set. This is the first video in my friend Danny and I's new series 4 on Friday. I hope you'll stick around, see if you won my flash giveaway from last weekend, find out how you can win another one of these stamp sets, and see how I made these cards. Thank you so much for stopping by today. If this is your first time to my channel, I hope by the end of the video that you'll be inspired to click on that subscribe button below and maybe even tap on the bell for notifications. If you're already a subscriber and regular viewer, welcome back. I'm so glad you're here again. I let you know last weekend about a monthly series that my friend Danny and I are going to be collaborating on. She will be sharing her projects on her blog, and I will be sharing my projects here with you on YouTube. Just about every month, we want to come and share with you 4 projects using the same product, tool, or technique. This is a way for us to use what we have and stretch it and see what possibilities there are for just a single item or technique. In the announcement video, I did have a flash giveaway, and I let you know that you would be winning the stamp set that I'm going to be using today. So for today's 4 projects, I will be using the Willow stamp set from One Canoe Two. And later in this video, I'm going to tell you who won the flash giveaway. And I'm going to tell you how you can win the second extra set I have of this stamp set. Please make sure once you're done watching my video today that you go to Danny's channel and see what stamp set she's going to use and what she created with it. Her blog is linked below. Once I start sharing the process part of my video today, I will go into a voiceover. So make sure that if I don't answer any questions you have in the voiceover, to leave those in the comment section below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Let's get crafty. The supplies that I'll be using for the first card is the Find Joy in the Ordinary sentiment from the stamp set. I will be embossing with red tinsel embossing powder, and to stamp it I will use the Versamark Dazzle. I will be inking the edges of some of my paper, so I got out this sepia ink. To keep the static and to keep my fingerprints off of the embossing powder, I got out my embossing buddy. And I will be using these red kind of glittered sequins as embellishments on my card. For the paper, I have a piece of wood grain that is 4 inches wide by 12 inches tall. I have a white card base, a piece of red cardstock that is 3 7/8 by 5 1/8, and then a piece of white cardstock that is 3 3/4 by 5 inches. Now the white cardstock, it really can be any scrap that you have because this will be covered up. It just needs to be the correct dimensions. The first thing I did on this card was cut 1/2 inch strips out of the wood grain pattern paper. I cut 12 of these. I won't need them all, but I figured while my trimmer was out, I should cut a couple extra. Next, I got out my sepia ink pad and I inked all of the edges. This gets rid of the white core of the paper, and later these are going to look kind of like rustic wood floorboards. Off camera, I ran my scrap of white cardstock through my Xyron so I could have just a full coverage of adhesive on one side of this piece. Then I started laying my wood floor. I start by placing the plank about 1 inch, 1.5 inches in from the right edge. I trim off the excess and then make sure to flip that piece around so both of the inked edges touch. Now you'll see that I left that extra on the other side. I will cut that off later. But what I do is just continue to lay those in a pattern. The second one I put in about 3 inches, and then the final one I made go all the way across that scrap of white cardstock. Once those were kind of situated, I then just repeated that pattern until I had finished the whole white cardstock. Once that was done, it was then time to trim off the extra boards. And because this left some edges, again with the white, I did get back out my sepia ink pad and just went around all 4 edges of that piece. Next, I got out my stamp positioner. Because with this piece, I do want to make sure that my sentiment is nice and juicy for the embossing powder. I do want to stamp that twice, and the stamp positioner allows me to make sure that it is in the same exact spot both times I stamp it. Once I have that done, I add my red glitter embossing powder, and you notice here that I do need to go in with a brush and kind of tap off or wipe off some excess powder, and then I heat that up with my embossing gun. Now I will tell you the adhesive kind of warped a little bit with all the heat, so you might want to be careful if you try this one. And now I'm going to start putting my card together. I put a lot of adhesive on the back of the wood plank piece because of the warping I just mentioned, and then I matted that with the red cardstock. You'll see here I've pulled out my big blue roll of foam tape, which if you've watched my channel very long, you know I love. I get this on Amazon, super economical. I do have it linked in the description box below if you want to check that out. Once I had that piece ready, it got placed centered on the front of the card base. And then I got out some mini glue dots. These actually come with my paper pumpkin kits, and I just placed 5 randomly on the card front. And then using my quick pick tool, I placed 1 red sequin on each of those glue dots. I did make sure that the glittery side was facing up. And here is a look at my finished card. The main supplies that I'll be using for my second card are the Be Still sentiment from the stamp set. I will be stamping in Versamark and then embossing in some gold embossing powder. I got out my Hero Arts Infinity dies. If you count from the top, I'm going to use the 4th one in and the 7th one in. I got out some small gold sequins. And for my papers, I have a piece of vellum that is 4 3/4 by 3 1/2. That is also the same size as the largest die that I'll be using. Then I have 2 pieces of pattern paper. Both of these are 5 1/2 by 4 1/4. And I have a top fold white card base. The first thing I'm going to do for this card is to cut a frame out of the pink pattern paper. I'm using those Hero Arts dies, and I am placing these onto the pattern paper using my Scotch Blue removable tape. This holds those dies in place while I run the pattern paper through the die cut machine, and then when I remove it later, it does not ruin the front of the pattern paper. I do have this linked in my description box if you want to check it out. Once that frame was cut out, I used my Scotch ATG to add adhesive to the back of it. Then I carefully placed that onto the front of my vellum. Next was time to do the stamping. Because I do want to double stamp and get an extra juicy image for that embossing powder, again I use my stamp positioner. Once I had that image stamped and nice and juicy, and I went to pour the embossing powder over it, as I was going to get rid of the excess powder, I did kind of just have to flip it over quickly. I couldn't really tilt it to the side and pour it off, because then the embossing powder would have gotten caught in the frame. Once the powder was heat set, I then started putting my card together. The first thing I did was add the full-size piece of pattern paper to the card front, and then I got back out my big blue roll of foam tape to place adhesive around the outside edge of my vellum piece. The great thing about this foam tape is that it is thin enough not to be seen from the front. I do buy the 1/4 inch wide foam, but I do have a couple other sizes linked in the description box. To finish the card off, I'm going to add 3 gold sequins to the left of the Be Still sentiment. Just like last time, I'm going to place those mini glue dots first and then use my quick pick tool to place a sequin on each of those. And here is a look at the finished card. Now that we're halfway through the cards, let's go ahead and find out who won my flash giveaway from last weekend. Here in just a little bit, I'll switch over to my desktop. If your name is the one that comes up, make sure to listen and find out how you can claim your prize. Let's go ahead and find out who won. To choose the winner today, I'm going to be using the YouTube random comment picker. I start by copying and pasting the URL from my video, and then in my text or hashtag box, I'm going to add hashtag enter me. That way, I will know that the people who use the correct hashtag will be the ones entered into the drawing. And congratulations goes to Pam Duxbury. Congratulations! If your name was just drawn, here's what I need you to do. Today is Friday, November 22nd, so you will have until Friday, November 29th to claim your prize. After that, I will do one redraw. So the winner needs to send me an email at callmecraftyal@gmail.com and just say, hey, I was the winner of your flash giveaway. And then after you've done that, come back to this video, leave a comment below with the first 3 letters of your email address. That way I'm going to be able to connect your YouTube account to the email that you've sent me. Don't despair if your name wasn't drawn today. I will be back at the end of this video to tell you how you can enter to win the second extra stamp set I have. Let's go ahead and get back to the video. For my third card, I will be using the longest sentiment in the stamp set. It reads, now and then, it's good to pause in our pursuit of happiness and just be happy. I will be stamping with Versamark and embossing with the same embossing powder as card number 2. I also got out my stitch nested label dies from Stampin' Up. I will be using the 2 largest dies. I grabbed some gold half pearls. And for my papers, I need a scrap of white to stamp on. I have a pattern paper that is 5 1/4 by 4 inches, a second pattern paper that is 5 1/2 by 4 1/4, and then I have a top fold card base. To get started on card number 3, I'm going to be stamping my sentiment. Once again, because I want to ink it up a couple times, I'm using the stamp positioner. I will then be embossing it with that gold embossing powder. You'll notice here it is kind of stamped in the center of my white piece of cardstock, and that's just so later when I go to die cut it, I have the extra white where I need it. I did forget to use my embossing buddy before I stamped this card, so you'll see I had to pull out my brush to wipe away some of the excess powder. Once I had the powder heat set, it was then time to do some die cutting. I started by using that blue Scotch removable tape on the smaller die, and I am going to just place that so the sentiment is in the bottom part of that die. Once that is done, I'm going to be die cutting from the striped paper, the larger one of the nested frames. Because this paper is just going to be a mat for the other pattern paper, it doesn't really matter that the center is missing. Once the die cutting was all done, I then started putting the card together. The striped paper got adhered flat to the card front, and then I put the 2 die cut pieces together, and then I kind of marked with my finger what area I wanted to cut off the top. To add a little dimension to the card, I'm using my foam tape again to adhere the pattern paper piece on top of the striped piece. Once those 2 pieces were on the card front, I then used my ATG to adhere the sentiment just flat down onto that floral paper. And it was at this point where I realized I probably wouldn't need those gold sequins. Here is a look at the finished card. Here are the supplies that I'm going to be using for my 4th and final card today. From the stamp set, I will be using the thank you sentiment. I will be using a wreath builder today to create the card. This is the 3 3/4 inch one. I got out a Darice embossing folder. This is a larger one and it has a chevron pattern. For my stamping, I got out 3 fresh ink pads, light pink, dark pink, and a green. And for my papers, I have a square of white that is 3 3/4. I have a square of scrap wood grain that is 3 7/8 inches. I have a piece of white that is 4 1/8 by 5 3/8, and then a standard top fold card base. I think this card really shows that you don't necessarily have to have a wreath builder stamp set to build yourself a wreath. What I do is select one of the leaves from the stamp set, and I'm just going to stamp that around the edge for the main part of the wreath. Now I got lucky and I placed that exactly so that the stem went around in an almost perfect circle. Now some of the leaves do overlap, but you'll see later that when I go to use the dark pink, that is where I actually stamp the dark pink flowers. If you haven't used a wreath builder before, this is a quick, easy way to make a great focal point. Once I had the circle part of the wreath finished, I then used the flower from the stamp set and my dark pink ink to go around and stamp that flower 8 times on my wreath. And lastly, to create the wreath, I used the little heart from the stamp set, and you'll see the first one where I'm stamping the heart on the inside of the wreath. I actually only stamp it 4 times because I do 2 turns each time. Once those first 4 are stamped, I then move my heart to the outside of the wreath and stamp it around 4 more times, again turning it twice between each stamp. Because the background of my card is going to be white cardstock on white cardstock, I wanted to add some texture to the top layer so you could tell the difference between the two. So I ran that piece of white through the embossing folder, and then I'm going to adhere this onto the card base with the foam tape just for some added dimension. Next, I'm going to be stamping the sentiment, and once again I'll be using my Versamark ink with gold embossing powder. For this card, I chose the thank you sentiment from the stamp set, and I really just love the way that looks inside of that wreath. Once the embossing powder was all set, I added my wreath to the center of the wood grain square. I then put this on the card front using more of my foam tape. To bring out the gold in the sentiment and to add a little more shine to the card, I decided to get out my gold half pearls. These do already have adhesive on the back, and there's actually adhesive between each one. So you'll see there I cut those apart before I started adding them to the card front. And here is a look at the finished card. I hope you enjoyed getting to see how I made my 4 cards today using that single stamp set. If you did, as always, I appreciate a thumbs up. Now, here is how you can win that second extra stamp set that I have. All you need to do is leave a comment below with your favorite card that I made today. We have card number 1, number 2, number 3, or number 4. So you'll need to let me know which one of these was your favorite, and then make sure to put the hashtag enter me, and that way that I'm going to know that you're interested in the drawing. If you don't do both of those things, you will not be qualified for the giveaway. Here are some other things that you need to be qualified. You do need to be a subscriber to my channel. You need to be at least 18 years or old, and you need to live in the United States. If that sounds like it's you, and again you want to leave the comment with the hashtag enter me, please leave that comment by Friday, November 29th at midnight, and then I will be back that following week to announce the winner. Thank you so much for stopping by today and taking the time to watch my video. I look forward to coming back next month for the 4 on Friday, where we are going to use a 6x6 paper pad in 4 different ways. Until my next video, I hope you're all having a crafty day. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch all the way to the end of the video. I hope that you'll consider clicking on one of the videos or playlists I have linked above, and if you're interested in any of the products or tools that I use in the video, I do have some links in the description box.